Why do some people quietly transform their lives while others remain stuck in the same loop, making promises they never keep? It's not because one group has more talent, better luck, or more time. It's because they've learned one brutal truth. Nothing changes until you do the same thing, over and over, long after it stops being exciting. Let's be honest. Consistency is not glamorous. It doesn't come with applause. No one's cheering you on when you get up early to do what needs to be done. There's no instant reward for showing up on the hard days. And that's exactly why most people don't make it. They wait for motivation, for clarity, for a right moment that never arrives. But the Stoics would tell you, the right moment is always now. The discipline to act, despite discomfort, is the only freedom you ever truly control. When you force yourself to be consistent, especially when your emotions scream for escape, you stop being a slave to circumstance. You stop being shaped by how you feel. You become the sculptor, not the clay. And over time, the person who was once broken by delay becomes someone others look at and say, "How did they do it?" If you're ready to step into that version of yourself, the one who doesn't flinch when things get hard, the one who keeps moving quietly and powerfully, no matter how uncertain the path, then you're exactly where you need to be. Also, consider subscribing, because you're choosing to surround yourself with ideas that strengthen your mind, sharpen your character, and guide you towards something deeper than comfort, purpose. They told you to wait. Wait for the right time. Wait for the mood to be right, the stars to align, your energy to return, your purpose to reveal itself. Find your why, they said. Wait until you feel inspired. And so you waited. Days became weeks. Weeks turned into vague months. But the truth is, inspiration is the most deceptive comfort we've ever been sold. It's a feeling, not a foundation. And feelings, while powerful, are volatile. One moment they lift you, the next they vanish. Try building anything on that, a career, a routine, a life, and you'll end up stuck in a loop, always starting, never arriving. People love motivation because it gives them a reason to delay. It sounds noble, it sounds emotional, but it's just dressed up procrastination. Deep down, you already know this. You've felt it. That rush of energy that comes with a new goal. And then, the crash. When reality shows up without permission. When no one's clapping. When the mirror is quiet. That's the part they don't talk about. The part that doesn't trend well. But that's where change begins. There's a kind of person out there who doesn't wait. They don't wake up needing to be inspired. They don't need the weather to be perfect, the playlist to be just right, or the coffee to kick in before they begin. They just start. Not because they're special, but because they've learned something most people never realize. Action comes before feeling. That uncomfortable truth separates the ones who get things done from the ones who talk about it. If you wait until you feel ready, you'll spend your life in preparation. You'll become a master of vision boards, goal lists, and potential, but you'll never see transformation, because nothing changes until you move, and keep moving. It's easy to fall for the lie because it's comforting. It's easier to believe that the reason you haven't succeeded is because you haven't found the right emotion, the right drive. But ask yourself, what has waiting ever given you? Has a perfect wave of motivation ever lasted long enough to build something real? We romanticize the moment when something clicks, but we forget that most of the time there is no click. Just you, tired, uncertain, but moving anyway. And that's the difference. That's the kind of consistency that builds a mind you can trust, a life you can be proud of. That's the slow, quiet power of repetition, showing up again and again, even when nothing seems to be changing. Stoicism teaches us that control is not found in the external world, but in our choices, our responses, our discipline. You don't control when you feel inspired, but you can control when you act. And if you make action the anchor, not emotion, then you've already stepped ahead of 90% of people. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I am rising to do the work of a human being, not a machine, not a motivational speaker, a human being." And that's all you need to be, one who acts, not one who waits. So here's the hard truth. You can either spend your life chasing moments that may never come, or you can become the kind of person who builds something lasting through deliberate effort. Every time you push through resistance, you're training your mind to obey you, not your mood. You're proving to yourself that you are not made of softness and hesitation, but of steady movement, deliberate choices, and inner control. There is no perfect moment. There is only the moment you decide to start and refuse to stop. Everyone else is chasing sparks, chasing highs, waiting for the magical feeling that tells them it's time. But feelings are like clouds, beautiful, dramatic, and always changing. You cannot build a life on clouds, but you can build one on rhythm, on showing up at the same time, in the same place, regardless of whether the sky is clear or full of storm. And once you stop relying on motivation, something remarkable happens. You stop fearing the low days. You stop waiting for energy, because now you have a system, a standard, and you become the kind of person who moves with purpose, not only when it's easy, but especially when it's hard. It's in those quiet, uninspired moments that your identity is formed. Not when you feel like doing the right thing, but when you do it anyway. That's when you're carving something strong, stable, and real out of the chaos of your mind. It's not glamorous. There's no applause. No one sees it. But it becomes who you are. Not someone who starts 100 things and finishes none, but someone who does what needs to be done without needing to feel a certain way about it first. That kind of person doesn't need motivation. They become the motivation for themselves, for others, and most importantly, for the life they are quietly building day by day. So no, motivation isn't the answer, and it never was. You don't need to wait for a spark. You don't need to hunt for your why. What you need is right in front of you, the next step, the next action, the next repetition. One small choice stacked on top of the last, over and over again, until the old version of you is just a memory. That's how it's done. That's how people who look ordinary become extraordinary, not overnight, but over time, relentlessly, patiently, without fanfare. And you're capable of that kind of discipline. You're capable of choosing structure over chaos, showing up over shutting down. Not because someone told you to, not because you felt some grand emotion, but because you decided to live like someone who's serious about changing. That's what consistency really is. Not a performance, not a product of feeling good, but a quiet rebellion against everything inside you that wants to stay comfortable. And once you step into that mindset, everything begins to shift. Not all at once, but inevitably. Everyone wants progress. We talk about it, we crave it, we dream of it. But most people have no idea what it really looks like. They picture breakthroughs, visible, loud, immediate. They expect transformation to feel like fireworks, like some kind of cinematic event. But the truth is, real progress is quiet. It's slow, it's often boring, and more than anything, it's invisible when you're in it. No one claps when you wake up early and sit in silence to write. No one notices when you keep a promise to yourself that no one else even knew existed. But those are the moments where it's happening. That's where the foundation is being laid. It's not in the highlight reels, it's in the moments that feel like nothing. That's the real currency of growth. Doing the work when there's no audience, no reward, and no surge of motivation to carry you. Most people never get far because they mistake the absence of applause for the absence of progress. They assume that if results aren't visible, then something must be broken. But growth doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with fanfare. It builds quietly, in layers, beneath the surface of your habits. You might be doing the same thing every day, the same routine, the same steps, the same uncomfortable repetition, and still feel like you're standing still. But something is happening beneath that surface. Every time you resist the urge to quit, every time you choose the long road over the shortcut, you're compounding. You're collecting invisible victories that will one day cash out in ways you never imagined. The problem is, we've been conditioned to expect immediacy. Our minds have been trained to seek feedback loops, results, recognition, signs that we're on the right path. So when we don't see them, we doubt, we hesitate, we slow down. But Stoic wisdom reminds us, your job is not to control the outcome. Your job is to stay present with the process. Marcus Aurelius said, "Don't expect the world to be consistent if you're not consistent with yourself." Consistency isn't about speed, it's about direction. And if you keep moving forward, even slowly, even imperfectly, you are winning in ways the world can't measure yet. The most dangerous lie you can believe is that small things don't matter, that skipping one day won't hurt, that cutting one corner won't set you back. But it does, because you're not just building results, you're building identity. And identity is shaped by what you tolerate from yourself. If you let yourself off the hook every time you're tired or bored or unmotivated, you teach yourself that your word isn't worth much. But when you stay consistent, even when no one's looking, even when no one seems to care, you're teaching yourself something much more powerful. I can be counted on. That's not just about work ethic. That's about trust. And trust is what holds you together when everything else falls apart. Progress isn't a dramatic shift. It's the gentle erosion of weakness. It's the quiet strengthening of self-discipline. It's not always obvious, but if you're consistent long enough, you'll look back one day and realize that everything about you is different. You'll feel it in how you respond to stress, how you handle failure, how you carry yourself, not because something outside of you changed, but because you did, quietly, relentlessly, one step at a time. The mistake most people make is measuring their progress too early. They plant a seed, water it once, and wonder why there's no tree. But nature doesn't work that way, and neither does your growth. There are seasons of planting, seasons of watering, and seasons of waiting. That waiting part, the long stretch where nothing seems to be happening, that's the part that requires the most strength. Because you have to believe in what you can't see yet. You have to keep going without evidence. That's what separates the committed from the casual, the ones who keep showing up, even when their efforts seem invisible. You don't have to be loud to be powerful. You don't have to be seen to be making progress. In fact, the most meaningful progress you'll ever make will likely happen when no one's watching, because it's in those moments, those quiet mornings, those lonely evenings, those hours where nothing feels exciting, that you're learning how to keep a promise to yourself. And once you do that enough times, it becomes who you are. Not someone who needs results right away, not someone who needs praise to keep going, but someone who moves with quiet force, steady, unshaken, and deliberate. Every small action you repeat is either a deposit or a withdrawal. Every skipped task, every abandoned goal, every excuse, it pulls you further from who you say you want to be. But every completed task, every decision to follow through, every step forward, it adds to a balance that will one day compound into something unrecognizable. That's the real reward of consistency. It's not just external success, it's internal credibility. And when you believe in your ability to follow through, there is nothing and no one, that can take that from you. We often think of change as a sudden event, a breakthrough, a moment of clarity that transforms everything. But most of the time, change isn't a moment, it's a process. One small shift at a time. One uncomfortable choice repeated until it becomes natural. And if you wait for the moment, you'll miss the process. You'll be too focused on the finish line to realize the race was won during training. Consistency doesn't just create results, it creates readiness. So when the opportunity finally comes, you're not scrambling to rise. You're already standing tall. You don't need to do extraordinary things to live an extraordinary life. You just need to do ordinary things, consistently, without excuse, without drama, without quitting. The most consistent people in the world rarely look impressive in the beginning, but they outlast the rest. They outgrow their limits, they outwork their doubts, not because they were better, but because they were steady, because they kept going. That's why consistency is the real currency of progress. It's not exciting, it won't trend, but it builds something that no one can take from you, real change, the kind that lasts, the kind that turns effort into excellence, not by force, but by rhythm, not by bursts, but by steps, one after another, until you're no longer trying to be the person you admire, you are. Everyone feels unstoppable at the beginning. There's a kind of energy that surges through you when you commit to something new. It feels powerful, hopeful. You imagine what life could look like if you finally followed through. You see the end result so clearly, the transformation, the praise, the pride, and for a while that vision carries you. You move fast, you feel alive. The discomfort is still there, but it's hidden beneath the thrill of beginning. You're not worried about what it takes yet. You're just enjoying the momentum. But then something always shifts. The excitement begins to fade. The honeymoon is over. And suddenly, the path you were sprinting down begins to feel heavier, longer, lonelier. And that's when most people vanish, not because they weren't capable, not because they weren't serious, but because they never trained for what comes after the spark. That moment, when the emotions die down and the real work begins, that's the dividing line. It doesn't show up loudly. It arrives in silence. You miss one day. You tell yourself you'll get back to it tomorrow, but tomorrow feels heavier than today. You scroll instead. You justify it. You wait for that initial motivation to come back, but it doesn't, because that kind of energy was never meant to last. It's not built for endurance, it's built for ignition, and once the fire is lit, your job is no longer to chase the spark, it's to keep the flame alive. That's the part no one wants to hear, the grind after the glory, the repetition after the rush. But that's where the real shift happens. The truth is, you don't become disciplined until you're bored, until you're tired, until you don't want to do it anymore and still do. That's when consistency becomes real, when it's no longer about riding a wave of emotion, but about honoring the commitment you made. Not to the goal, but to yourself. That's when you're building something solid, not a burst of momentum, but a foundation. Something that doesn't fall apart the moment you don't feel like showing up. Carl Jung once said, "Discipline is the bridge between the conscious and the unconscious." When you push through the days you feel empty, you're not just building a habit, you're creating a version of yourself that no longer depends on how you feel to move. You're making your values stronger than your moods, and that is how inner strength is formed, not in moments of inspiration, but in the silence of repetition. People think success is about talent or luck or timing, but more often than not, it's about endurance. It's about who can keep going when it's no longer fun, when the novelty wears off, when the task feels like work, and you do it anyway. That's when you pull away from the pack, because while everyone else is waiting for excitement to return, you're moving through the resistance. You're adapting. You're learning how to work without needing to feel good about it. and that skill alone changes everything. There's a quiet pride that comes from doing something no one else sees, from showing up when no one is clapping, from honoring your path even when it feels like you're walking alone. That pride isn't loud. It doesn't show up in selfies or status updates, but it builds a kind of self-respect that no amount of external praise can replace, because you know what you've endured, you know what you've pushed through, and that knowing, that private strength, becomes your anchor. This is the part most people never prepare for. They read about success, they get hyped up by speeches and visions and promises, but they never stop to ask themselves, what happens when the motivation fades? What will carry me then? If your answer is nothing, you'll break. If your answer is, I'll wait until I feel it again, you'll stall. But if your answer becomes, I'll keep going anyway, then you're already ahead, because you've stopped depending on the unreliable and started building from the unshakable. The hardest days aren't the ones where everything goes wrong. They're the ones where nothing happens. No visible progress, no external reward. Just you, the process, and the quiet voice inside saying, why are you even doing this? And if you don't have an answer rooted in something deeper than excitement, you'll quit. But if you do, if your answer is anchored in discipline, in values, in a clear picture of who you're becoming, then those hard days become sacred. They become the proof that you are not like most people. Most people are fueled by outcomes. They need to see something to keep going. But real growth is internal. It's invisible at first. It feels like nothing is happening until everything has changed. And that kind of change doesn't come from intensity. It comes from patience. It comes from staying in the game long enough for the process to take root, for the repetition to become rhythm, for the discomfort to become normal. You don't have to be extraordinary to keep going. You just have to be willing to let go of the need for excitement. You have to learn to find beauty in the mundane, meaning in the repetition, purpose in the process. And when you do, you realize that the beginning was never the hard part. The beginning was easy. It's what comes after that tests who you really are. There will always be someone who starts faster, someone who looks more passionate, someone who seems like they've got it all figured out. But speed means nothing without stamina, and passion burns out without structure. It's not the person who shines in the first week who wins. It's the one who doesn't stop in week 6, or month 6, or year 6. The one who doesn't need a reason to stay. They are the reason, because they've chosen consistency as their identity, not their tool. You're not falling behind because you lost excitement. You're falling behind if you let that loss stop you. The real shift comes when you stop mourning the spark and start building the fire, when you stop chasing how it felt and start embracing what it takes. You're not meant to feel thrilled every step of the way. You're meant to show up regardless. And if you can do that, if you can stay standing when the energy fades and the silence sets in, then you're already doing what most people can't. Because when the excitement fades, and it will, what's left is you, your character, your discipline, your commitment, and that's where your story truly begins. Not in the energy of the start, but in the resolve to keep walking long after the road gets quiet. That's the kind of consistency that builds more than success. It builds strength, it builds self-respect, and it builds a life no one can take away from you. The real challenge isn't waking up early or going to the gym or doing the hard work day after day. The hardest part of consistency lives inside your head. It's the negotiation, the quiet debate that starts the moment you open your eyes, that familiar internal voice, subtle, persuasive, and always well-timed. You can start tomorrow. One day won't matter. You've earned a break. It doesn't shout. It whispers. It speaks in your own tone, with just enough logic to make you pause. And that pause, That's the danger. That's the crack where discipline begins to leak. It's not that you don't know what to do. It's that you're constantly convincing yourself why now isn't the right time to do it. And if you give that voice room to grow, it will take your time, your energy, your progress, and in the end, your identity. Most people lose not because they failed, but because they surrendered to that inner debate too many times. They let that voice talk them out of showing up. And with each small surrender, they taught themselves something deeply damaging, that their feelings get to decide their actions. But you're not your feelings. You're not your doubts. You are what you consistently choose in spite of them. And every time you ignore that voice, every time you choose action over comfort, you're casting a vote for the person you want to become. Not just in theory, in practice. It's not motivation that changes people. It's the daily decision to say no to the easy way out, even when no one's watching, even when nothing seems to be at stake. That inner battle is fought in silence. There's no scoreboard. No one sees you win, but you feel it. And over time, it changes something in you. You stop needing external accountability because you've developed internal loyalty. Loyalty to the future you promised yourself. That's what self-trust really is. Not believing you'll always get it right, but knowing you won't abandon yourself when things get hard. And that trust is more valuable than any streak, any plan, any goal. Because it's what carries you when your goals feel distant and your plans fall apart. It doesn't happen overnight. At first, that voice is strong. It knows your patterns. It knows your weak points. It's patient. But so are you. And each time you act anyway, not perfectly but persistently, you make that voice smaller. You weaken its grip. You strip it of its credibility. And in its place, something else grows. A kind of clarity. A kind of strength that's not loud, but steady. You begin to walk through resistance instead of around it. You stop arguing with yourself and start guiding yourself. Carl Jung once wrote, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." That voice inside you isn't your enemy. It's your opportunity. It's the place where you meet yourself honestly. And when you learn to face it, not with shame, but with patience, you stop fearing it. You stop running from your own mind. And that shift, though invisible, is life-altering. Because the real enemy was never the world outside. It was your willingness to believe the story that your comfort was more important than your character. So when you wake up tomorrow and that voice returns, and it will, don't be surprised, don't be discouraged. See it as the signal that the path ahead is meaningful. If it wasn't, resistance wouldn't bother showing up. It always arrives when you're about to do something that matters. Not to stop you, but to test you, to ask if you're really serious or just interested. And how you respond doesn't need to be dramatic. It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be consistent. One decision at a time, one refusal to negotiate. Eventually, that daily resistance becomes your training ground. You stop dreading it and start expecting it. And with enough repetition, the decision to act becomes your default. Not because the voice went away, but because you stopped treating it like a command. You started treating it like noise. And that noise, once deafening, now just fades into the background while you move forward. That's not just habit, that's strength. The kind that doesn't depend on mood, on willpower, or even on clarity, but on your quiet commitment to do the right thing anyway. This is what makes consistent people so different. They're not emotionless, they're not robots. They've just learned that every moment of hesitation is a chance to either believe in their excuses or reinforce their discipline. And every time they lean toward action, they're closing the gap between who they are and who they're trying to become. It's not flashy. It's not inspiring in the traditional sense, but it's powerful. Because when that gap closes, You no longer feel like an imposter in your own life. You become aligned with your thoughts, your choices, your direction. There's a quiet freedom in this kind of life, not the freedom to do whatever you want whenever you feel like it. That's chaos dressed up as self-expression. Real freedom is doing what's right for you, even when you don't want to. It's looking your excuses in the eye and saying, "Not today," and meaning it. Not because you have something to prove, but because you know what happens when you don't. You've seen the cost of giving in, the regret, the loss of momentum, the slow erosion of belief in yourself. And you've decided it's not worth it. You don't need a perfect plan to win this inner war. You need consistency. You need to show up enough times that your nervous system stops associating discipline with suffering and starts seeing it as normal, as peace, as clarity. And that only comes through practice. Through choosing again and again to be the kind of person who doesn't let fleeting thoughts sabotage long-term vision. The kind of person who acts because it's time, not because it feels good. Because it aligns, not because it excites. Over time, this rewires something in you. You go from being the person who tries to convince themselves to take action to being the person who doesn't even consider skipping. The question is no longer, will I do it? The question becomes, how fast can I begin? That shift changes everything. Your energy, your focus, your identity. And you start to realize that the version of you who hesitated, who looked for the exit, was never weak. They were just waiting to be led, waiting for you to stop arguing and start deciding. That's what this battle is really about. Not perfection, not performance, but leadership, self-leadership. The ability to move yourself when everything in you says wait, to choose what's right over what's easy, to trust that the person you're building is worth more than the comfort you're sacrificing. And once that trust is strong enough, the battle quiets. Not because resistance disappears, but because you're no longer afraid of it. You've seen it, you've faced it, and you've kept going anyway. You don't wake up one day and suddenly feel like a different person. Real change is subtle. It begins quietly, beneath the surface, in the choices no one sees and the victories no one celebrates. Discipline doesn't come with a dramatic announcement or a feeling of triumph. It builds slowly, in the background, one decision at a time. You say you'll do something, and then you do it. That's where it starts. Not because you felt like it, not because someone else was watching, but because you chose to follow through. And that one simple act, following through, starts to rewrite the story you've been telling yourself. You stop thinking of yourself as someone who tries and start realizing you're becoming someone who does. Not occasionally, not when it's convenient, but consistently, even quietly. The world is obsessed with visibility. If something can't be posted, shared, tracked, it feels like it didn't happen. But the most important transformations are the ones that happen in silence. Not because they're less powerful, but because they're more personal. Identity doesn't shift when people cheer for you. It shifts when you show up for yourself when no one else will. When you turn down the easier path, not once, but repeatedly, and begin to associate your own voice with commitment, not excuses. That's when you start becoming someone you can rely on, not just in the big, obvious moments, but in the small, forgettable ones that slowly define the person you are becoming. Most people believe identity is something fixed, a label you inherit. I'm just not disciplined. I've always been this way. But that's a story, one often written in moments of failure and repeated so many times it starts to sound like truth. The real truth? Identity is elastic. It stretches and shifts depending on how often you show up and what you're willing to tolerate from yourself. If you keep breaking your own word, even in small ways, your self-perception erodes. But every time you keep a promise, even the smallest one, you plant a seed a quiet message to yourself that says, "This is who I am now." And the more often you repeat that action, the more deeply rooted that message becomes. You begin to feel it in the way you carry yourself, in the way you speak to yourself during hard moments. You stop needing to convince yourself with affirmations because you've already shown yourself who you are through action. And when identity becomes action-based, everything changes. You're no longer chasing motivation. You're no longer clinging to routines because they feel good. You're showing up because that's what someone like you does. Someone who has discipline baked into who they are. Not because they're special, but because they made it part of their rhythm. There is no more unconscious force than the way we define ourselves. If you believe you're inconsistent, you will act accordingly, even when part of you wants to change. But when you act in a way that contradicts that belief often enough, it loses its grip. You're not faking it. You're replacing it. You're using action to overwrite an outdated identity that no longer serves you. It doesn't take grand gestures. In fact, the smaller the action, the more powerful it often is, because small is sustainable. Small becomes habit, and habit becomes identity. Making your bed every morning, sitting down to write for 10 minutes, even when your mind is blank, drinking water instead of reaching for another coffee, turning off distractions when it's time to focus. These aren't productivity hacks, they're micro decisions that rewire your relationship with yourself. They say, "I matter enough to show up for." And that simple truth, repeated enough times, reshapes your core. You begin to trust yourself again. And trust is everything. Without it, even the best plans collapse under doubt. With it, even uncertain paths become manageable, because you're no longer relying on hope or luck. You're relying on your own pattern of behavior. You've seen what you do when things get hard. You've watched yourself push through discomfort, and that memory becomes fuel. It becomes proof that you're not who you used to be. You're becoming someone else entirely, someone stronger, clearer, more rooted. It's important to understand that this process doesn't come with fanfare. No one will hand you a medal for skipping the shortcut. No one will post a photo of your early morning journaling session or your quiet moments of restraint. But over time, that invisible work becomes visible in everything you do. In your discipline, in your calm, in your resilience when things fall apart and you no longer do. It's not a transformation that others notice first. It's one that you feel, one that becomes unshakable because you built it with your own two hands. When you start acting in a way that reflects your future self, something strange happens. The gap between who you are and who you want to be begins to shrink, and eventually it disappears. You stop feeling like a person with potential and start becoming a person of integrity. The distance between your intentions and your behavior narrows, and that internal alignment brings peace. Not the kind that's loud or flashy, but the kind that lets you look in the mirror and feel still. The beauty of this process is that it's available to anyone. You don't need to be talented. You don't need a perfect past. You don't need to start tomorrow. You just need to start now, with one small choice that aligns with the kind of person you want to become, and then another and another. Not because you're chasing results, but because every act is a vote. Every act reinforces your identity. Every act whispers, "This is who I am." And over time, that whisper becomes a voice. That voice becomes belief. And that belief becomes reality. This isn't about perfection. You will have off days. You will stumble. You will miss a step. But consistency isn't about never falling. It's about returning. Every time you return, you reinforce your identity even more powerfully. Because now, it's not just discipline, it's resilience. You've shown yourself that even when you fall, you rise. That even when the story seems to slip back into old chapters, you are capable of rewriting the next line. You are not fixed. You are not frozen in some past version of yourself. You are changeable, moldable, evolving, and the tool you hold is your action. Use it wisely, use it quietly, use it often. Let your behavior tell the truth of who you are, even before your beliefs catch up. Let your actions introduce you to the version of yourself you haven't met yet, the one who keeps showing up, the one who doesn't need applause, the one who knows exactly who they are, because they've proven it in silence, again and again. There are days when everything inside you resists movement, not because you're lazy, and not because you don't care, but because the emotional weather inside feels stormy, heavy, confusing. You might wake up feeling uncertain for no clear reason. You might start your day with plans, only to feel them collapse under the invisible weight of a mood you didn't ask for. That's what emotions do. They shift without warning. One moment you feel focused and driven, the next you feel foggy and withdrawn. And the trap many fall into is thinking these feelings get to decide the direction of the day. But they don't. Your emotions are not the steering wheel. They're the wind. And wind is meant to be observed, not obeyed. That's what Stoicism teaches us. At its very heart, it's not about suppressing emotion, but about learning to act wisely despite it. You don't have to feel confident to take action. You don't need to feel inspired to do what matters. The world around you doesn't pause until your mind clears. Life continues. Deadlines remain. The people who succeed over time aren't those who wait for the perfect mood to begin. They're the ones who build regardless of it. The strongest people aren't immune to emotion. They've just developed the clarity to separate feeling from function. It's easy to assume that emotional clarity should come first, that once you feel better, you'll do better. But that order rarely works. Waiting for motivation, for clarity, for the right mood becomes a cycle of stalling. What actually changes things is behavior. When you act in alignment with your values, especially when your emotions scream otherwise, you start to regain a sense of control. You prove to yourself that you're not at the mercy of internal weather patterns. You're grounded. You're capable of standing still, even when the storm picks up. There's a quiet power in doing the right thing on the wrong day. It's not glamorous. No one sees it. But those moments become the backbone of self-respect. When you move forward without waiting to feel ready, you redefine what readiness even means. It becomes less about feeling and more about choice. And that choice is available to you always. No matter what's happening outside, no matter what's swirling inside, you still get to choose your response. You can be tired and still write. You can be anxious and still show up. You can feel lost and still take the next step. Carl Jung once said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." That statement becomes especially sharp when we place it next to emotional turbulence. Because when emotions rule, we tend to live in intention. I want to. I plan to. I meant to. But intention without action leaves a void. You may have the deepest desire to grow, but desire doesn't move you. Action does. And if you can act while uncomfortable, confused, or low, that's when your identity starts to transform. Not because you fixed your mood, but because you outgrew its influence. And let's be honest, emotions lie sometimes. They magnify, they distort, they whisper fears that feel like truth. If you believe everything you feel, you'll spend your life chasing shadows. Not everything that feels urgent is important. Not everything that feels heavy is impossible. That's why your job isn't to feel your way into action, it's to act your way into clarity. Movement often brings the emotional shift you've been waiting for. Action is the antidote to stagnation. It doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to begin. Think about how many times you've postponed something because you weren't in the right headspace. How many moments you've let pass by, waiting for a spark. How many ideas you've held back because you didn't feel bold enough to share them. The irony is, every time you do that, you reinforce the idea that your emotions are in charge, that you must ask them for permission. But what if you didn't? What if you did the thing anyway? Not to punish yourself, not to prove something, but because you respect yourself enough to follow through, regardless of the mood of the moment. This mindset is not about detachment or coldness. It's about freedom, the kind of freedom that comes from not being enslaved to your ever-changing internal state. There's nothing wrong with feeling deeply. What matters is how you live in those feelings, whether you become reactive or whether you stay anchored, whether you drift or whether you decide. It's not about ignoring how you feel. It's about choosing not to let how you feel decide who you become. When you act in alignment with your principles, especially when it's hard, your inner dialogue begins to change. You no longer say, "I hope I feel better tomorrow so I can start." Instead, you say, "Even if tomorrow is hard, I'll continue." That small shift is the difference between chasing progress and creating it. It's the difference between being emotionally dependent and emotionally disciplined. One leads to regret. The other leads to trust. Trust in yourself, trust in your path, trust in the process. Every day won't feel like a winning day. There will be flat days, frustrating days, days when your mind feels loud and your energy feels distant. But those days aren't failures, they're tests. And how you respond to them becomes your training ground, not just for discipline, but for clarity. You begin to learn the difference between discomfort that must be endured and distraction that must be ignored. You begin to build a life that's not ruled by the inconsistent, but shaped by what is constant, your decision to show up anyway. What would happen if you stopped waiting to feel better before doing better? If you stopped letting your inner weather forecast control your direction? What if you treated discipline not as something rigid or punishing, but as an act of inner alignment? A quiet return to who you've chosen to be, even when it's difficult. That's the kind of consistency that doesn't break in the face of mood swings or mental fog. It stands, and by standing it becomes real strength. Not loud, not proud, but unwavering. There's a rhythm to life that can only be found when you stop chasing emotional highs and start honoring your commitments. When you stop asking how you feel and start asking what matters. When you begin each day not by checking your mood, but by reminding yourself what you're building. That rhythm becomes a kind of inner harmony. It doesn't mean you don't feel, it means you no longer serve what you feel. You serve your principles, you serve your vision, you serve the future you're creating. And that future doesn't need your emotions to behave, it needs your actions to align. That's what separates a wandering mind from a focused one, a drifting life from a meaningful one. You don't need to feel ready. You just need to begin again and again until beginning is no longer a question, it's just who you are. There's a moment in everyone's journey when the silence becomes deafening, no praise, no recognition, just you, your efforts, and the echo of your own footsteps. It's the space where motivation fades, not because you lack purpose, but because the world has gone quiet. And in that silence, many turn back. They think the lack of applause means they're on the wrong path. They assume if no one is cheering, nothing valuable is happening. But that couldn't be further from the truth. The absence of applause is not a sign of failure. It's a test to see if you're doing it for the outcome or because it aligns with who you've decided to become. When you do something difficult, really difficult, it's natural to want someone to notice, a nod, a like, a pat on the back. It feels like confirmation that it mattered. But real transformation doesn't announce itself with applause. It unfolds quietly, like a seed breaking apart underground. No one sees that. No one celebrates that. But it's the most important part, because without that unseen breaking, there's no growth above the surface. And in your life, those invisible moments, those long days when you keep going despite no reward, are where your roots grow deepest. Most people are driven by performance. They do more when eyes are on them. They thrive on external validation, and when that fades, so does their consistency. But when your drive becomes internal, when it's no longer tied to attention or praise, that's when you become unstoppable. That's when your work becomes an act of character, not currency. It's easy to be consistent when everyone claps. It's noble to be consistent when no one notices. Because that's when it's real, that's when it's pure, that's when it's yours. Every master was once invisible. Every creator went through the phase of obscurity. Every powerful person spent long stretches of time being ignored, overlooked, or dismissed. What made them different wasn't luck. It was their ability to keep showing up when no one asked them to keep building even when the world didn't care. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Just that you do the right thing. The rest doesn't matter." And in those lonely moments, that quote becomes a lighthouse. You're not doing it for the noise. You're doing it because it's right, because it's necessary, because it's true to who you are. There's a deep sense of freedom that comes when you stop waiting for someone to notice you, when you stop depending on recognition to validate your path. You begin to own your discipline. You start creating not for approval, but for alignment. You train, you write, you study, you build, not because someone is watching, but because you are. And in the end, you're the one you have to live with. You're the one who knows whether you kept your promises, whether you gave your all when you had no audience, whether you stayed true to your mission, even when the world was silent. This isn't about pretending applause doesn't feel good. It does. We're wired to respond to acknowledgement. But when applause becomes a requirement, not a reward, that's when you've given away your power. You've allowed other people's reactions to dictate your direction. And that's dangerous, because applause is unpredictable. It's fleeting. Sometimes it never comes. And if your consistency depends on it, you'll never last. You'll always need more, and you'll stop when it's gone. But if your consistency is anchored in your own values, your own vision, your own sense of identity, that's when it becomes sustainable. That's when it becomes unshakable. Every time you show up in silence, you strengthen a part of yourself the world can't touch. You build resilience, self-trust, and clarity. You separate yourself from those who are only moved by external incentives. You become a person of depth, not just performance. The shadows become your training ground. The quiet becomes your proving ground. And the absence of applause, that becomes your teacher. Because here's the truth, applause doesn't build you. Discipline does. Applause doesn't sharpen your skills. Repetition does. Applause doesn't anchor your purpose. Conviction does. So stop chasing noise. Stop measuring your progress by how many eyes are on you. Start measuring it by how many promises you keep to yourself when no one's watching. Because that's what builds confidence. That's what earns self-respect. That's what turns effort into transformation. There's something beautiful about watching someone evolve in silence. They don't announce their intentions. They don't seek validation for every step. They just move, quietly, steadily. They wake up early. They stay late. They improve inch by inch, day by day. And then one day, the results speak so loudly that silence is no longer possible. But by then, the applause doesn't matter, because they're already too far in. They've already become the person they set out to be. And whether the world notices or not, they've already won. If you're walking a lonely path right now, where it feels like no one sees your effort, keep going. If you're building something from the ground up, brick by brick, with no praise or recognition, keep building. If you're improving quietly, far from the spotlight, keep rising. The applause may come, or it may not. But what's more important is that you become someone who doesn't need it, someone who doesn't perform for the crowd, but lives in alignment with their purpose. Because one day, long after the noise fades and the audience leaves, you'll be left with one person, yourself. And in that quiet moment, you'll know whether you lived in truth or in performance, whether you built something real or something hollow, whether you were guided by applause or by purpose. That's what makes the difference. So let them sleep on you. Let them ignore your work. Let them overlook your progress. You're not here for applause. You're here for growth, for alignment, for truth. Keep going, especially when no one is watching, because that's when it counts the most. Most people run the moment boredom sets in. They mistake stillness for stagnation. They assume that if something doesn't excite them anymore, it must not be right. But boredom isn't a sign of failure. It's a doorway to mastery. Repetition is not wasted energy. It's the slow sharpening of a blade. What feels dull on the surface is often the part where your mind begins to settle into depth. And when you push past the craving for constant stimulation, something unexpected happens. The work begins to transform you. At first, the novelty of a new habit carries you. The rush of change, the adrenaline of progress, it's intoxicating. But that feeling fades, and what's left is routine, predictable, unremarkable. And that's when people quit. Not because it was too hard, but because it became quiet, because it didn't provide the emotional high they were chasing. They confused that absence of novelty with the absence of growth. But the truth is, boredom is where the real work begins. It's where discipline is tested and depth is formed. Mastery doesn't live in motivation. It lives in the ability to show up when nothing new is happening, when the steps feel the same, when the excitement is gone, when there's no immediate reward. It lives in the person who understands that greatness is sculpted in silence, and what you do in that silence, that's what defines you. You don't become exceptional by doing different things every day. You become exceptional by doing the same things with better focus, better form, and better presence. Carl Jung once said, "Man needs difficulties. They are necessary for health." That includes the difficulty of repetition, the difficulty of staying when your mind wants to run, the difficulty of returning to the same task, the same space, the same motion, again and again, without turning away. Because that's where the transformation happens, not when things are exciting, but when they're dull and you stay anyway. When you no longer need your task to entertain you, you've become bigger than your emotions, more grounded than your impulses. Think about it. How do elite athletes train? How do musicians reach the peak of their craft? How do writers develop their voice? It's not from bursts of inspiration, it's from the grind, from showing up day after day, even when they'd rather do something else, even when it feels like they've plateaued. They don't run from boredom, they use it. They understand that boredom isn't an obstacle, it's an indicator. It signals that they're in the zone of refinement, that they're no longer amateurs chasing dopamine, but professionals committed to mastery. We live in a culture addicted to novelty, a world that teaches you to switch the moment something feels routine, swipe when it's boring, skip when it slows down, move on when it no longer thrills you. But that mindset is poison to growth, because anything worth building, anything real, requires a long, often boring stretch of repetition. And the few who make peace with that, they're the ones who build something lasting, something meaningful, something unshakable. And the beauty is, over time, what once bored you begins to reveal its layers. You start noticing details you missed before. You see subtle improvements. You feel a rhythm developing, a flow state. You realize that you're not repeating for the sake of it. You're refining. You're carving away what's unnecessary. You're learning to listen deeper, to focus longer, to move with intention. You're becoming a person who doesn't just start things, you finish them. Who doesn't just dabble, you dig. That's rare. That's powerful. Eventually, repetition becomes a form of meditation, a place where you meet yourself again and again, where your mind calms down and your instincts sharpen, where your values are tested and reaffirmed. You stop relying on motivation to carry you because your identity has taken over. You no longer say, "I have to do this." You say, "This is what I do." That shift, that's when you become someone others can't compete with. Because while they're still looking for the next new thing, you've already found strength in the familiar. Boredom teaches patience. It teaches discipline. It teaches how to stay grounded when everything inside you wants to escape. It teaches you to stop chasing fireworks and start trusting the ember. And it's the ember, not the spark, that keeps the fire alive. Over time, that quiet flame becomes unshakable, reliable. It burns through setbacks, through distractions, through fatigue, because it's no longer fueled by emotion. It's fueled by purpose. When you accept boredom as part of the process, it loses its power over you. It no longer feels like a problem to fix. It feels like a stage to master. You begin to embrace stillness, to lean into routine, to use it as a mirror that reflects your level of commitment. If you only train when it's fun, you'll never reach your potential. If you only create when you're inspired, you'll never build anything lasting. But if you stay when it's dull, if you show up when it's quiet, if you keep refining when no one's watching, that's how you earn the kind of progress that can't be taken away. You'll notice something else too. The boredom you once feared, it starts to feel like a secret weapon, a signal that you've moved beyond the noise, that you're no longer chasing distraction, you're mastering attention. That's rare in today's world, and it gives you an edge most people never develop, because while they're still seeking the next rush, you're becoming someone who doesn't need one. You've made peace with repetition. You've turned the mundane into meaning. You've found growth in the grind, and that's the shift that changes everything. You stop seeing boredom as a threat. You see it as a teacher. You learn from it. You grow through it. You build in it. And in time, it sharpens you into someone that can't be moved by fleeting feelings or distracted by shallow excitement. You become consistent, grounded, focused, not because life is always exciting, but because you've learned to thrive when it's not. So the next time you feel bored with the process, don't run, stay. Watch what happens when you don't give in. Notice how your mind stretches, how your patience deepens, how your discipline grows. That's the edge. That's the power. That's where mastery begins. Not when you feel like doing the work, but when you do it anyway, again and again, until what once felt boring becomes your brilliance. Change rarely announces itself. It doesn't knock on your door and tell you it's arrived. It doesn't light fireworks or leave signs along the way. Progress happens in the background, hidden behind the veil of your ordinary days. You wake up, do your routine, repeat the same efforts, and wonder if anything is actually working. That's the trap. You expect change to feel dramatic, but most of the time it feels like nothing at all. And yet beneath the surface, something is always moving. Quietly, invisibly, permanently. Most people give up too early, not because the path was too hard, but because they couldn't see the results. They planted seeds, watered them for a week, and when nothing sprouted, they assumed the soil was dead. But growth doesn't follow your timeline. It follows its own. And if you rush it, if you dig it up too soon, you'll never know what was about to bloom. The progress you're hoping for is often happening while you're doubting it. And the more patient you are with the silence, the more powerful the outcome becomes. You have to learn to trust the process without proof. That's the real test. Showing up again and again when you feel like your efforts are vanishing into the void. You go to the gym and the mirror looks the same. You sit down to write and the words feel average. You practice, rehearse, study, repeat, and still you feel like you're not getting better. But you are. Every rep is building a body you haven't fully seen yet. Every paragraph is sharpening a voice you're still discovering. Every quiet, invisible act of discipline is rewriting your identity beneath the surface. The mind craves evidence. It wants to see instant results. But mastery requires a level of detachment from that craving. You have to act without the reward, show up without applause, improve without the guarantee of recognition. You have to become someone who values the act itself, not just what it gives you. Because ironically, the more detached you become from immediate results, the faster real transformation happens. You stop chasing quick wins and start building something that lasts. One of the biggest ways we waste our time is by abandoning the work too soon. Not because it isn't working, but because we convince ourselves that it's not. The truth is, your effort rarely looks like progress in real time. The change is so subtle, so internal, that you often don't recognize it until months later, when something small triggers a new response in you, and you realize you've outgrown who you used to be. That's the magic of invisible progress. It doesn't always show up in external achievements. It shows up in how you handle setbacks, in how you respond to stress, in the way your thoughts have softened or sharpened, in how you now pause instead of react, in the boundaries you've learned to set. These aren't things you can measure in a day, but they matter more than almost anything else, because they're signs of deep-rooted transformation, the kind that doesn't just change your habits but your identity. And still, it's easy to feel discouraged, especially when others around you seem to be advancing faster. Their progress looks louder, flashier, but don't let it fool you. Some people rise fast and fall just as quickly, because their foundation wasn't built during silence. They skipped the stage where you are now, the stage of invisible work, quiet growth, inner alignment. They built a house on sand, you're building one on stone, and that takes time. Sometimes the best thing you can do is zoom out. Instead of judging yourself by the day, look at the week, then the month, then the year. See where you were, who you were, what you couldn't handle back then that you can handle now. That's growth. That's proof. It just wasn't loud enough to notice in the moment, but it was always there, taking shape, layer by layer, quiet but real. You have to become the kind of person who is okay with being underestimated, who's okay with being unseen for a while, who doesn't need every effort to be validated immediately. That kind of person becomes unstoppable, because they're not motivated by praise or fear of failure. They're motivated by alignment. They keep showing up because it feels right, because it reflects who they're becoming, not because someone else is clapping. That's the essence of real consistency. And when the breakthrough finally comes, it won't feel like a surprise. It'll feel like a quiet arrival, like something that was always meant to be. You'll look back and realize every day you thought was wasted, every effort you thought was invisible, every step that felt like standing still, was building the version of you that could finally carry the weight of success. That's the irony of progress. It looks like nothing until it becomes everything. Eventually, you stop needing proof to believe in yourself. You become your own evidence. Your discipline becomes your confidence. Your patterns become your foundation. You stop second-guessing every move and start trusting the deeper rhythm of the work. The part of you that knows it's moving in the right direction, even when the path looks flat. That's the part that doesn't give up. That stays. That builds. In time, others will see the results. They'll ask how you did it. They'll assume it happened quickly. They won't see the quiet mornings, the lonely days, the repetitions that felt like nothing. But you'll know. You'll know what it took to get here. You'll know how often you doubted, how often you stayed anyway. That's the power of progress in disguise. It humbles you, and it hardens you. It teaches you patience. It builds your character while you wait. And maybe that's the most valuable part. Not the results, but who you had to become in order to get them. You had to let go of your obsession with speed. You had to stop chasing certainty. You had to make peace with doubt. You had to believe before there was proof. That's not just a transformation. That's a rebirth. Quiet, invisible, but permanent. There's something powerful about the moments that happen before the world wakes up, when it's still dark. When no one's texting you, no one's calling, and no one expects anything. In those quiet hours, your decisions speak the loudest, not because anyone's watching, but because you are. Getting up early, choosing water over scrolling, stepping into a routine when your body whispers to stay still, these aren't just habits. They're small declarations. Each one tells your mind, I'm in charge now. These moments might look ordinary from the outside, but inside, they're foundational. They are the discipline before the discipline. You don't build a strong life by reacting. You build it by preparing. And that preparation often looks like saying no. No to convenience, no to chaos, no to your own impulses. It's setting your alarm not because it's fun, but because it's necessary. It's laying out your clothes the night before, planning your meals, blocking time on your calendar. These are not glamorous acts. No one gives you a trophy for choosing broccoli over fast food or turning off your phone at night. But these small, silent rituals become your edge. They become the invisible armor you wear into a noisy world. At some point, you realize that discipline isn't about being strict. It's about being free. Because without structure, you're a prisoner to impulse. You say you want peace, but you invite chaos. You say you want focus, but you let everything interrupt you. The rituals, the ones you repeat daily, especially when no one notices, are what shield you from that drift. They build your identity one brick at a time. They reinforce your values through action. And slowly you stop needing motivation because habit has taken its place. But here's the thing. No one applauds you for doing the boring things right. No one cheers when you close your laptop on time or go for a walk instead of scrolling through apps. That's why it's so important that you learn to find meaning without needing recognition. You do it for you, for your clarity, for your energy, for your life. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." And that's what these rituals are, little awakenings, tiny moments where you choose to be deliberate instead of distracted. There's a kind of respect you earn with yourself when you follow through. When you keep the promises that no one else hears. When you become the kind of person who does what they say they will, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's uncomfortable. And that self-respect, it shows in how you walk, in how you speak, in how you respond when things get tough. People won't always know what changed, but they'll feel it. Because the discipline before the discipline rewires how you carry yourself. And the best part, it doesn't require talent. It doesn't require money. It doesn't require approval. Anyone can wake up early. Anyone can put their phone down. Anyone can plan their day, hold themselves accountable, and walk a little taller because they know they've already won the morning. That's the beauty of it. It's available to everyone, but only a few will do it. Not because it's complicated, but because it's quiet. And most people ignore what's quiet. You begin to see patterns too. When you skip your morning routine, you feel off. When you delay your priorities, the day gets away from you. When you chase pleasure first, you pay for it later. These aren't random experiences. They're signs. Signals from your own life saying, this isn't aligned. And when you listen, When you notice the difference between discipline and disarray, you reclaim your power. You stop living by accident and start living on purpose. At first, it might feel mechanical, forced. You'll resist it. Your mind will whisper, "Just today, let it slide." But the more you follow through, the more natural it becomes. Eventually, it's not even a question. You just do it. And that's when it sticks. That's when it becomes who you are, not something you try, but something you embody. The shift is subtle, but it's real. One day you wake up and you don't need to push yourself anymore, because the path is already paved. This is what most people misunderstand about consistency. It's not about being robotic. It's about choosing alignment over chaos, repeating what works, trusting what centers you, and understanding that even when your emotions fluctuate, your actions don't have to. You don't need to feel inspired to be consistent. You need to feel committed, because commitment doesn't waver with weather, mood, or convenience. It shows up because it said it would. And the rituals you build now, they echo into your future. The way you treat your mornings spills into how you treat your relationships. The way you protect your time shapes how you value yourself. The way you structure your day teaches your mind what's important. And over time, those seemingly small choices turn into outcomes, into momentum, into transformation. It's not always about doing more. Often, it's about doing less, but doing it better, removing the clutter, saying no to the noise, simplifying your process until it's so clear that it becomes automatic. That's when you realize the discipline before the discipline was never just about the morning or the schedule. It was about who you were training yourself to become, someone who doesn't wait to feel ready, someone who doesn't live on accident, someone who chooses who they are, one small act at a time. The world is loud. It will always try to pull you in 1,000 directions, but you don't have to follow. You can create space for yourself. Space to breathe, space to think, space to act like the person you're becoming, not the person you're escaping. And every quiet act of structure is a reminder. I know who I am, I know what I value, and I choose to live in alignment with it. So while others are chasing noise, you protect your rituals. While others wait to feel motivated, you've already moved. While others live for the weekend, you've designed your days. Not for perfection, not for performance, but for peace. The kind of peace that only comes when your actions finally match your intentions. That's what discipline really is. It's not punishment, it's preparation, not a burden, but a blessing. A way of saying, I'm not leaving my life to chance. You take ownership, not just of your time, but of your identity. And slowly, you become someone who doesn't break promises to themselves. That's rare. That's powerful. That's freedom. We like to think there's going to be a right time, a perfect moment where everything finally lines up. Your mind is clear, your schedule is open, your energy is high, your environment is peaceful. And when that magical window appears, that's when you'll begin. That's when you'll commit, when you'll finally change, when you'll do all the things you've been putting off. But that moment doesn't come, or if it does, it disappears faster than it arrived. Because life doesn't bend itself to your preferences. It keeps moving. It throws distractions, discomforts, responsibilities, and emotional storms. And if you're always waiting for peace before you act, you'll be waiting forever. The idea of balance is often sold like a lifestyle goal, like it's something you can find and hold on to. But balance isn't a destination. It's not a fixed state. It's a moving target, always shifting depending on what life demands of you. Some days you'll be off kilter. Some weeks will be messy. But those aren't failures. They're reminders that you're alive, in motion, dealing with real things. And even in that chaos, you're still capable of taking a single step. not because it's easy, but because you've stopped believing that you need ease in order to begin. Starting now, not later, not next month, not when the motivation magically kicks in, is the most honest kind of commitment. Because it requires letting go of the fantasy. It means you stop negotiating with yourself. You stop trying to build the perfect schedule or wait for perfect mental clarity. You start despite the discomfort. You begin inside the storm. And what you find is that the act of doing creates momentum that thinking never could. Movement wakes you up. It sharpens you. It shows you that clarity isn't something you find. It's something you generate by showing up. There's a myth that once you're organized enough, once you've got your journal just right, your sleep optimized, your desk cleared, then discipline will click into place. But the truth is simpler. Discipline is born in chaos. It's forged in noise, in tiredness, in stress. It's forged on the days you don't feel like it. When everything inside you says, maybe later, and you respond with, no, now. That's the moment where change begins, not when it's glamorous, not when you're inspired, but when you choose action over delay. Epictetus said, "How long are you going to wait before you demand the best for yourself?" That line isn't meant to shame. It's a wake-up call, because deep down, you already know what needs to be done. You already feel the pull of the person you could become, the one who doesn't need to be reminded, the one who doesn't need perfect conditions, the one who simply begins. But every day you postpone, that version of you fades just a little more into the background, until one day it's no longer a whisper, it's a regret. The longer you delay, the more you feed the illusion that something needs to happen first, that you need to feel ready, that the timing needs to feel right. But readiness is a decision, not a feeling. You decide you're ready. You act, and then your mind catches up, not the other way around. That's why people who wait for motivation rarely change, because motivation is fleeting. It rises and falls with your emotions, your sleep, your stress. But commitment is a choice, and it's made in the quiet, unglamorous moments where no one is watching. There's also the illusion that balance means everything gets equal time, that if you're doing it right, nothing ever gets neglected. But that's not balance, that's fantasy. In reality, balance often looks like temporary imbalance. It looks like pouring energy into one thing while something else sits idle, and being okay with that, because you know it's not permanent. You're choosing your focus, not losing it. You're not failing because you missed a workout or skipped a social event. You're prioritizing, and priorities, by definition, are not equal. There will always be reasons to wait, always. A project at work, a relationship problem, a lack of energy, a fear of doing it wrong, but waiting doesn't solve any of them. Waiting keeps you trapped in the idea of who you might be. Action is the only thing that proves anything, and when you act, when you begin even a little, you start to realize something quietly powerful. You didn't need perfect. You just needed to start. And in that choice, you take back control of your time, your story, your life. The person you're trying to become isn't sitting in the future. They're waiting inside every small decision you make today. They're hidden in the way you show up for yourself when no one's holding you accountable. They're built in the moments where you don't feel like it, but you do it anyway, not to impress anyone, but to align with the version of yourself you respect. That kind of consistency builds character, and character creates results that discipline alone can't. People talk about balance as if it guarantees peace, but sometimes peace comes from leaning into intensity, from letting go of the need to have it all figured out, from surrendering the fantasy of control and embracing the process instead. The work won't always feel good, but it will always reveal you. Every skipped excuse, every uncomfortable start, every act of follow-through shapes the core of who you are. That's the real gift of doing. Not just the outcome, but the transformation that happens inside. It's okay if you feel messy. It's okay if you don't have it all lined up. You're not supposed to. That's why starting matters so much more than planning. The plans will change, but if you're in motion, you can adapt. If you're stuck in your head, the best plan in the world means nothing. Because action refines you, action teaches you, action humbles you. It's where confidence is born. Not because you knew what would happen, but because you proved that you'd show up regardless. There's a quiet power in abandoning the myth of balance, in recognizing that now, not later, is where everything begins. This moment doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to be yours. Own it, use it. Take the first step, not because it's easy, but because you're tired of being stuck. You'll never feel ready. But you're more than ready enough. And the person you'll become, they're already inside you, waiting for you to stop waiting. Because in the end, it's not the perfect plan or the perfect time that changes your life. It's the imperfect action you take again and again, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's quiet. That's what shapes you. That's what builds the kind of life that doesn't rely on motivation. It relies on movement, and that movement starts now. We tend to blame ourselves for everything, for feeling distracted, for losing motivation, for failing to follow through on the things we promised ourselves we'd do. And while self-reflection is important, it can easily become self-blame. We say we're lazy, undisciplined, not focused enough, as if our character alone determines our behavior. But what if it's not you? What if it's where you are? Because the truth is, your environment is shaping you in ways you barely notice. And sometimes, changing your space changes your life faster than changing your thoughts ever could. Your surroundings are not neutral. Every item you see, every sound you hear, every person you interact with, they all send silent signals to your brain. Signals that influence your attention, your emotions, your habits. A cluttered desk doesn't just look messy. It overwhelms your mind. A phone within reach doesn't just sit there. It tempts you. A chaotic home doesn't just create noise. It becomes your inner weather. And the worst part is, it happens silently. You don't always feel it happening. You just start noticing that it's harder to think, harder to move, harder to stay consistent. That's why willpower alone is not enough. You can be the most motivated person in the world, but if your space is filled with distractions, your energy will bleed out before your intention can take root. You can wake up with a strong mindset, but if the people around you constantly doubt you, question you, or distract you, that mindset starts to crumble. Because even the strongest mind gets tired when it's fighting its environment every day. And that's not weakness, that's human. Seneca once wrote, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you." But that principle applies far beyond people. It applies to the entire architecture of your life, your room, your habits, your schedule, your tools. Everything around you is either reinforcing your values or eroding them. And often, we don't need to fix our motivation. We need to fix our settings. We don't need more goals. We need fewer triggers pulling us off track. Look at your physical space. Is it designed for your focus or your escape? Are your tools easy to reach, or are your distractions always closer? The position of your chair, the background noise, the apps on your home screen, they all speak to your brain. And they say, this is what matters. You can spend hours journaling about discipline, but if your workspace screams chaos, your brain will follow its lead, because your environment teaches your nervous system how to behave. And eventually, it becomes the script you follow without thinking. Sometimes, We forget that even people are part of our environment. The people who surround you can elevate you or quietly drain you. Some people sharpen your thinking just by being near. Others leave you doubting yourself after every conversation. And it's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's just the subtle tone of disbelief, the raised eyebrow, the sarcastic comment, the friend who means well but always pulls you back into comfort, into old habits, into sameness. Growth becomes 10 times harder when the people around you are committed to staying the same. But the beautiful thing is, you can edit your environment. You can remove what drains you. You can relocate what distracts you. You can build a space that honors your focus instead of fighting it. You don't need a perfect home or a perfect office. You just need a space that aligns with your intention. Clear surfaces, a quiet corner, a wall with your values written on it, a shelf with the books that changed you. These small details create big shifts because they act as daily reminders of who you are and who you're becoming. Rearranging your space isn't just about productivity, it's about identity. Every time you make it easier to act in alignment with your values, you reinforce those values in your subconscious. Every time you make distraction harder to access, you protect your energy. That's not discipline, that's design. And when you design your surroundings with care, your life starts to flow more naturally. You stop feeling like you're pushing a boulder uphill. You stop battling yourself. You start moving with less resistance. Of course, not everything is under your control. Some of us live in chaotic homes. Some of us work in noisy offices. Some of us are surrounded by people we didn't choose. But even then, you can create small pockets of intention. A morning routine that centers you before the noise begins. A corner that belongs only to you. A notebook that holds your real thoughts. A pair of headphones that give you peace. These things matter more than we realize, because they become anchors. And in a world full of chaos, anchors are how we stay grounded. The danger of ignoring your environment is that you'll keep thinking you're the problem. You'll blame your lack of progress on weakness, not realizing you're trying to meditate in the middle of a storm. You'll think you lack motivation when really you're drowning in distractions. And as that misunderstanding builds, it becomes self-fulfilling. You start believing you're not cut out for discipline, not realizing it's not you. It's the battlefield you've been standing on. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Your environment is part of that unconscious influence, and until you see it clearly, you'll keep wondering why you can't focus, why you keep slipping, why things feel harder than they should. Once you make it visible, though, once you realize how much power lives in your space, you stop trying to force your way forward. You start setting the stage for who you want to become. There's a kind of quiet freedom in taking control of what you can. Even if it's just your desk, even if it's just the time you wake up, even if it's just your morning playlist, those choices, though small, create a ripple. And that ripple becomes momentum, and that momentum becomes change, not all at once, but gradually, silently, in the background. Until one day you look up and realize it's not just your environment that's changed, it's you. So before you try to rewrite your goals, pause and look around. Before you start another plan, clear your space. Before you blame yourself for falling short, ask whether your surroundings are setting you up to succeed. Because the hidden enemy isn't always laziness or fear or doubt. Sometimes it's simply the room you're in. And when you change the room, the story starts to shift. Not because you're trying harder, but because you've stopped making it harder than it needs to be. We often think of kindness as something we extend outward. A gesture toward others, a smile, a favor, a soft word in a hard moment. But one of the deepest forms of kindness is the kind that echoes forward. The kind you give to yourself, not now, but tomorrow. That's what consistency really is. It's not rigidity. It's not pressure. It's care. It's you showing up today so that tomorrow's version of you doesn't have to start from zero. So that when life gets heavy, and it will, something inside you already knows the way forward because you've walked it before, step by step. Think about how many decisions wear us down. The debate about getting up early, the mental tug-of-war over whether to work out or skip, the question of whether to eat well, show up for your goal, stay focused. These things don't take much time, but they drain a lot of energy, especially when they're undecided. And every day you hesitate, the resistance grows. But every time you act without debate, that resistance shrinks. That's the quiet magic of consistency. It removes decisions. It clears the fog. It gives tomorrow's self a head start. Most people treat each day like a new start, and in some ways, it is. But if every day is a full reset, you're not building, you're surviving, you're reacting, you're always catching up. True progress, the kind that builds momentum and makes you unshakable, happens when each day becomes a continuation, not a reboot. When you start not with questions, but with rhythm, not with pressure, but with presence. When brushing your teeth, writing in your journal, going on that walk, it's all just part of who you are, and no longer something you have to negotiate with. It's easy to underestimate how powerful this is, to think that small routines don't matter, that skipping a day won't break anything. But the real damage isn't in skipping, it's in the message you send yourself when you do. Because every time you break your word to yourself, even in silence, you chip away at your own trust. And the next time you say, "I'll start tomorrow," a part of you doesn't believe it. But when you stay consistent, even in the tiniest ways, you build something much more powerful than motivation. You build self-trust. And self-trust is how you move through storms. Epictetus once said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." It sounds simple, but it's radical, because it means the first act of becoming isn't grand. It's not some overnight transformation. It's doing the smallest thing, again and again, until it becomes the path you walk on without thinking. It's packing your gym bag the night before. It's reading one page, even when you're tired. It's going to bed without scrolling, even when you want to escape. These things don't look like life-changing choices, but that's the point. You don't build a future in one move, you build it in 1,000 quiet ones. Consistency is not glamorous, it's not loud, no one claps for it. You won't get a standing ovation for sticking to your routine. But in a world obsessed with intensity, consistency is what actually transforms you. Because intensity is impressive, but it's not sustainable. It burns bright, but it burns out. Consistency, though, it's slow fire. It warms the foundation. It keeps going when the excitement is gone. It stays when life gets complicated. It adapts without collapsing. And it makes sure that when your mood shifts, your habits don't have to. People wait for the perfect mindset, the right mood, the surge of inspiration. But that approach makes your future self dependent on chance, on how you feel, on what happens around you. And that's fragile. What consistency does is build a life that doesn't depend on how you feel. It gives you a track to run on when your mind is cloudy, when your body is tired, when your emotions are stormy. You don't have to think, you just move. You don't have to fight yourself, you just follow what you've already laid down. Even 5 minutes a day is powerful, even one small action. Because consistency isn't about time, it's about identity. Every time you do something again, you tell yourself, "This is who I am." And with enough repetition, that identity gets hardwired. You no longer need willpower, you no longer have to hype yourself up. You just do it. And that's when you know real change has taken root, when your habits start carrying you instead of the other way around. Sometimes we fear that consistency will make life dull, that doing the same things each day takes away our freedom. But real freedom isn't doing whatever you feel like. It's having the power to do what matters, even when you don't feel like it. It's being the kind of person who can be trusted, not just by others, but by yourself. And that kind of freedom doesn't limit your life. It unlocks it. Because when the basics are taken care of, when your core habits are stable, your mind is free to create, to explore, to grow in ways you never imagined. It's tempting to believe that our future depends on one big opportunity, a moment of luck, a breakthrough. But more often than not, the people who are ready for those moments are the ones who practiced for years in the quiet. They're the ones who didn't need the moment to succeed. They just kept moving, and the moment caught up to them. That's what consistency does. It creates luck. It creates skill. It creates space for your future self to rise without pressure, because the groundwork is already there. When you act today, think of that future version of you, the one who will be tired, the one who will face doubt, the one who will question everything. Give them fewer decisions to wrestle with. Give them fewer battles to fight. Give them a system, a rhythm, a path that's already marked. Don't just live for now. Leave a trail, one that leads back to your purpose, even when the world gets noisy. Because the more consistent you are today, the more gentle tomorrow becomes. So don't wait for motivation. Don't wait for alignment. Just do the small thing, again and again and again. Because one day you'll look back and realize it wasn't willpower that changed you. It was kindness, quiet, steady, consistent kindness to the person you were becoming all along. Most people think transformation comes from intensity, from that sudden push, the grand gesture, the all-night work session, the diet overhaul, the giant leap that's supposed to change everything. But intensity, while impressive, is fragile. It doesn't last. It relies on emotion, on motivation, on the perfect storm of urgency and inspiration. And when life stops being dramatic, which it always does, so does the momentum. The truth is, it's not the firework that builds your life. It's the quiet drumbeat, the rhythm, the slow, steady pulse of someone who shows up, not just when it's exciting, but especially when it's not. That's what most people miss. They chase moments. They live for the highs, the rush, the fast progress. And when that pace becomes unsustainable, they fall off. They think something's wrong with them, that they lack discipline, that they're not built for greatness. But nothing's wrong except the pace they chose. Because real change is not a sprint, it's a pulse. It doesn't feel like a breakthrough. It feels like showing up on a Tuesday when nothing is special, doing the report, writing the paragraph, walking the block, and doing it again tomorrow. Carl Jung once said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do, not what you dream about, not what you almost started, not what you planned in a journal, but what you actually follow through with." And follow through is about rhythm, not rush. It's about becoming someone you can rely on, a self that keeps moving even when the spotlight is off, even when no one is clapping, even when nothing new is happening. That rhythm, that consistency, that quiet loop. It's how your brain learns who you are. It's how your nervous system starts to trust that progress is being made even when the surface looks still. Intensity is dramatic, but rhythm is dignified. Intensity screams, rhythm whispers. And in a world obsessed with loudness, it's easy to underestimate the power of the quiet. But the quiet is where the roots grow. It's where mastery begins, where character takes shape. Because the mind adapts through repetition, not through random explosions of effort. Your muscles grow from regular tension, not from chaos. Your focus sharpens from returning again and again, not from occasional marathons. Everything in nature, trees, rivers, seasons, moves in rhythm. Why should your transformation be any different? The danger of intensity is that it often comes from frustration, from a desire to fix yourself quickly, to erase the discomfort. But discomfort is not a sign to quit or explode. It's a sign to adjust, to breathe, to return to the rhythm. That's why so many people start something powerful and abandon it. They ride the wave of motivation, then panic when it fades. But motivation is not designed to last. Rhythm is what fills the gaps between motivation. It carries you when you're tired, when you're uninspired, when your mind wants to hide. It gives you structure in the absence of excitement. Progress that sticks is almost always boring. It's repetitive. It's slow. But slow doesn't mean stagnant. Slow means stable. It means you're laying bricks, not throwing stones. You're building something permanent, not just creating moments. That's the mindset shift. You stop chasing the finish line. You focus on the footprint, on the step in front of you, and step by step, you find yourself becoming someone unrecognizable, not because of one intense sprint, but because of 1,000 steady moves no one else saw. When you build your life around rhythm, you protect yourself from burnout. You stop crashing. You stop starting over. You eliminate the cycle of shame that comes from extreme effort, followed by collapse. You learn to pace yourself, to understand your energy, to forgive yourself for being human, and in that understanding, something powerful happens. You no longer fear slow days. You no longer panic when progress is quiet. You trust that the beat is still playing and you're still on track. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Don't waste time wondering what a good person is. Be one." It's the same with any identity. Don't wonder what a disciplined person would do. Do what they would do. Don't analyze what a focused person looks like. Live like one. And if you can't do it all today, do one thing. Repeat that one thing. Make it your rhythm, because even one repeated action can redefine your identity. It doesn't have to be big. It has to be true. There's a reason the most successful people have routines, morning rituals, daily practices, set bedtimes. It's not because they're robots. It's because they figured out that rhythm frees the mind. It reduces noise, it removes decision fatigue, and it allows for creativity, for innovation, for reflection, not by adding more, but by making less chaotic. When you build a rhythm, you make space for clarity, for peace, for the kind of energy that doesn't just react, but responds with power and precision. Rhythm is how you turn struggle into strength, not by fighting yourself, but by flowing with what works, not by waiting for the right time, but by choosing now, again and again. You don't need to change your whole life in a day. You need to change what you do every day, because that's what becomes your life. That's what builds character. That's what carves purpose into the ordinary. And that's what makes you resilient when the world shakes. You don't win by doing more. You win by not stopping. That's the shift. You don't need to impress anyone. You don't need to prove your worth through intensity. You just need to keep showing up, inch by inch, brick by brick, moment by moment. You build the kind of momentum that doesn't break, because it's not based on hype. It's based on habit, on integrity, on rhythm. So the next time you feel like you're falling behind, ask yourself, am I stopping because I'm tired, or because I expected too much too fast? Did I build a pace I could live with, or one that only worked when everything was perfect? These questions matter, because rhythm only works when it's sustainable, when it respects your humanity, when it aligns with your long-term vision, not just your short-term mood. In the end, you don't need to push harder. You need to return softer. You don't need to burn brighter. You need to last longer. You don't need intensity. You need rhythm. Quiet, simple, unshakable rhythm. That's the path. That's the key. That's how you become the kind of person who doesn't just start things, but finishes them, and then starts again. Some days feel heavier than others, not because the world changed, but because something inside you dimmed. The spark that usually pushes you forward flickers. The thoughts you usually quiet grow louder, and every part of you whispers the same message. Not today, not now. Let it slide. Skip the effort. Rest instead. Delay instead. And on most days, rest is good. On most days, slowing down is wise. But then there are those days, the ones that test something deeper than motivation, the ones that ask not if you're excited, but if you're committed. The day you don't quit, that's the one that changes everything. It doesn't look like a triumph. It doesn't feel like a breakthrough. It feels like dragging your body through resistance, like doing the thing with no reward in sight, like choosing discipline over mood. That's the moment no one applauds, but that your future self will never forget. Because in that moment, you're not building a habit, you're building an identity. You're proving to yourself that the voice that wants to stop isn't the one in charge, that you don't need perfect energy, perfect clarity, or perfect conditions, just the courage to continue when you don't feel like it. Most people never realize how close they are to change when they quit. They think it's the big effort that counts, but often it's the smallest one that breaks the pattern. The one rep you didn't skip, the one sentence you wrote when uninspired, the workout you showed up for when tired. That's the moment you separate yourself from the version of you that stays stuck, not because you did something massive, but because you didn't give in. Carl Jung once wrote, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." But choosing becomes real only when it's hard, when the path forward feels dry, when your emotions pull you sideways. And when you show up anyway, that's when the choice becomes power. That's when the ordinary becomes extraordinary, not because it's loud, but because it's real. Think about a sculptor. The stone looks the same for days, even weeks, but then one more strike and something shifts. Not because that strike was special, but because of the 100 silent ones that came before it. Progress is never evenly distributed. Sometimes it hides behind plateaus, but each day you continue becomes another swing of the hammer, and eventually the cracks appear, the shape forms, the change reveals itself. Slowly, then suddenly. The day you don't quit is also the day you silence doubt. Not permanently, it always returns, but long enough to make your next move. It's how you teach your brain not to follow every feeling, how you train your nervous system to move even when comfort is missing, and that rewiring matters more than any burst of inspiration ever could. Because now, you're not relying on energy, you're relying on will, and that's a kind of freedom, not the kind you feel when you're flying, but the kind you earn when you refuse to stay grounded, when you keep going through the drag, the fog, the apathy, when your feet move even when your heart hesitates. You prove to yourself that momentum doesn't come from magic. It comes from decisions, quiet ones, repeated ones, ones no one sees. Seneca said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. And we waste the most when we pause out of habit, not out of need. When we let one tired morning turn into a lost week. When we give emotion too much power over movement. But what if you didn't? What if today was the day you didn't quit? Not because it's easier, but because it's harder. Not because you feel like it, but because it's exactly when you don't. There's a silent strength in doing what needs to be done, even when it feels empty. That's how you stack trust with yourself, and trust over time becomes your foundation. You stop negotiating with your feelings. You stop chasing perfect. You just return, again and again. And slowly the weight starts to shift, not off your back, but onto your side. Now you carry it with strength, you carry it with clarity, you carry it with peace. This isn't about perfection, it's about return, about showing up not to win, but to continue, about realizing that every time you choose not to quit, you're pushing the edge a little further, expanding the version of you that can endure more, create more, lead more. And slowly, that edge becomes your new baseline. What once felt hard becomes automatic. What once drained you now strengthens you. What once was a question, "Can I keep going?" becomes an answer, "I do." The day you don't quit changes your timeline, because now you're compounding actions instead of restarting them. You're keeping the thread intact, the rhythm going. You're adding another brick, another step, another page. And the beauty is, no one can see it, but you feel it, in your chest, in your breath, in the way your mind softens toward itself. It's no longer a battle, it's a pact. You don't have to be at your best. You don't have to glow. You don't have to smile while you do it. You just have to remain, just enough to get through the motion. Because motion, even unmotivated, still counts. Motion, even tired, still builds. Motion, even clumsy, still matters. It reminds your future self, "I kept going when I didn't have to." It's easy to look back and think that the big moments changed your life. The job offer, the new relationship, the award. But when you trace it back, it was probably a quiet day, a choice not to quit, a simple act that kept the flame alive, and you didn't realize it then, but that one act made the next one possible. And that's what today is. That's what this moment is. Don't let the lack of energy trick you into thinking you lack purpose. Don't let a tired mind convince you you've lost your way. Your path hasn't changed. Your lens just got foggy. And the way through isn't to stop. It's to keep walking, slowly, lightly, honestly. One foot, then the next. Because you don't need to win the day. You just need to not surrender it. You don't need to impress anyone. You don't need to create perfection. You just need to be there, in it, refusing to fold. That's what transforms a person. That's what builds a life. Not the easy days, but the ones you meet with quiet courage. The ones you meet with action, not excuse. The ones you look back on and say, "That day, I didn't quit." And that made all the difference. The day you refuse to quit becomes the day your future starts to trust you. Not because you moved mountains, but because you moved, even when nothing moved you. If this spoke to something deep in you, watch the next video on the screen. It was made for your journey. And as always, thank you for being a part of Stoic Journal.